views. So let me close out all these other pages here or files. And let's just say if you go to get, well, you're gonna get this home page. And they obviously know that because they're currently on that page if they're viewing this. So we're going to that home page. That's gonna be /API. And we're going into views.get routes. And we're not gonna specify a name. Now we need to connect this URL patterns file or this urls.py file to the main project here. So Django technically doesn't know about this right here. So we're going into study bud right here, and we're going into urls.py. This is now in the root directory. So we have 3 URLs files here, and we're going to create a new path here. And this one's going to be prefixed with API /, and then we're going to send the user to base.api, and then we're going into URLs. Dang it, I keep hitting /. So URLs. So we're going into base API and we're pointing them to URLs. So any URL that starts with an API or with API after the home URL, send them to this file and let this file take care of everything. So this urls.py file will now handle that. So let me make sure my server is on. The URLs are connected. We have a JSON response and we should see this information. So we'll go into our project here, port 8000 /API. And there we go. So we have a JSON response. This is now JSON data that anybody can make a request to and actually pull this data in. So they can use Python, they can use JavaScript, whatever they want in their side, and they can call this URL if this was a live link. So right now, only I can call it because it's on localhost, but imagine if I had this on a domain, anybody can go to this URL, make this request, and get this information. Okay, so that's a simple JSON response and a very minimalistic API, and there's not much we can do with it. Now, we can actually make our API work without the Django REST framework, but why do that when we have this awesome package? So let's go ahead and install that, and let's talk about what it can do here. So let's just go ahead and Google up Django REST framework, and let's open up this link right here. So we have the domain, and in the documentation, it shows us how we need to install it before we can use it. So we're gonna pip install Django REST framework, and then we need to add it to installed apps here. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll open our terminal up here. Let's open up a new one. And I'm just gonna make this a little bit bigger, paste that in. So pip install Django REST framework as one word. And I actually need to do Python-M first. So if you have that issue, go ahead and do that. And now it's installed. So I actually already had it installed here, so I don't need to worry about that. And now I need to go ahead and take REST framework and add that to installed apps. So that's all I need to do to actually just install it into my project. So very little. We need to run the pip install, and then in settings.py, we need to go to installed apps. So I'm going to create some space here, and then we're going to paste in REST_framework, or write that out in a single quote. And now we are good to go. So at this point, what I'm going to do here is start building out my actual URLs and make sure that they're based off of the Django REST framework. So let's go back to our views here. And in our views, the first thing I want to do is update this. So we don't want to return back a simple JSON response. We want to use what the Django REST framework gives us. So in the Django REST framework, if you want to look up the documentation, I'm going to try to change up my zoom here. So in the documentation, we can see this API guide and these tutorials on how to work with our requests and responses here, how to work with serialization, and so on. So I'd highly recommend you check this out here. So at this point, with class-based views, we use this mixin right here called API views. With a function-based view, we add this decorator, and that's going to add in extra functionality to our API here. So we're first going to import response right here and API view. So I'm going to copy these right here, and we're going to go into our views. And let's just remove this and paste this in. So from REST_framework.decorators, import API view. So we now have access because we installed it. And then we're going to do from REST framework.responses, import response. So the first thing is, let's go ahead and add in a decorator. So API view. And in here, we're going to pass in a list. And these are going to be the GET or the HTTP methods that are allowed to access this view. So that means at this point, this view can only take in a GET request. Now, if we want to allow a PUT request, we can say PUT. If we want to allow a POST, we would add it like that. So these are the methods that we can specify here. So we just want to allow a GET request. Users can only get data. And now we also want to update response here, or the JSON response to response, which we just imported. Now we don't need save here, so I can get rid of that. Let's save this and let's take a look here. So if I go back to my API, if I refresh this, we now get this user or this interface that shows more information about our API. And this actually gives us more functionality than it looks right now, or than how it looks. For example, we can actually make post and put requests directly from this interface. So it's like a UI for our API. We can see the methods that are allowed, we can see the content type, and we can see this data formatted. So it's not too much, but it just gives us a better interface to work with. Now, what I could do is just go to this section right here, go to JSON, and that's gonna allow or add in format right here and give us the standard JSON format. So you don't actually have to add this when you're calling the API, just go to this route and you'll get back this data. Let's say if you were trying to use this in JavaScript, you wouldn't get back anything else here, you would just get back this list right here. So that's not too much more that we added, it just gives us an interface, but we want to go ahead and actually render out some more information, and we'll see why this is, or why the Django REST framework is so cool. So at this point, we want to create another view here. So let's create a view here, and this is going to be called get rooms. So we're creating this route right here that we're going to allow everyone around the world to access, and we're going to pass in request, and we're just going to do return, and we're going to do response here. So we're getting back a response. So let's throw that in. And we're gonna pass in the rooms. So let's go ahead and get the rooms here. We wanna import that. So we're going into base. So now we are one folder outside of it. So we need to go back into base.models. And we're just gonna make a query for the room. So we're getting the rooms, and we're just gonna go ahead and do rooms is equal to room.objects.all. So all the rooms in the database. Now we do need to add in the decorators, so we wanted to use the Django REST framework functionality, so we'll just go ahead and do API underscore view, and we're only going to allow a get request, so we'll pass that in, and there we go. So at this point, we're going to have an issue here, and I want to show you what's going on. So before we actually fix it, I want to show you the issue. So let's quickly get this view. Let's go to the URLs here, so to our API views, and we'll create the path, and this is going to be API / rooms, and then close that off, and then the view is going to be get rooms. Okay, so we have our URL and we have our views that return back our rooms, and let's try this. So if I refresh this, we're going to get an issue here, and I'm not sure why it's not causing it. Let me just try to fix this. So get rooms, we'll save that. We have our response, our API view, and for some reason the URL is not working. So let's try this one more time. I'll do Control-Shift-R. Oh, I need to go to rooms. Okay, so we're going to rooms, and here we go. So object type of room is not a JSON serializable. So what's happening here is we're making a query set, and this is a Python list of objects here. So it's a Python list, it's a query set, and we need to make sure that we can serialize this data. So that means that response cannot return back Python objects. Now, it was able to do it with this, and we can even pass in dictionaries, and that JSON response method was able to serialize it and convert it, but objects cannot be converted automatically. So what we have here is a file for our serializers. So our serializers are going to be classes that take a certain model that we want to serialize, or object, and it's going to turn it into JSON data. So it's going to basically take our Python object, turn it into a JSON object or a JavaScript object, I guess a JSON object, and then we can return that. So the serializer is going to work a lot like the model form. We're going to import a serializer, we're going to create a class, specify the model and the fields that we want to serialize, and then that will be rendered out. So let's go ahead and make a quick import. So in our serializers.py file, we're going to do from REST framework.serializers. We're going to import a model serializer. So it's a lot like the model form. You're going to notice a lot of similarities here. So from base.models, import room, just like we did with the model form. I'm going to keep referencing that because you'll see the comparison. And then we're going to create a class here. And I like to call my serializer the object name, and then we just do serializer like that. Okay, so just like we had room form, now we have room serializer. This inherits from model serializer. That's a word that always trips my tongue up. So we're going to set the meta, and then we need to specify 2 fields at a minimum. We're going to specify the model, which will be the room, and then we're going to specify the fields that are allowed. And this can also be a list, but at this point, we're just going to say, give us all the fields. So take this model right here, this room model, and serialize it. So return back all these fields and turn that into a JSON object. So now that we have our serializer, we're going to take this serializer, we're going back into our API views, we're going to import it. So it's in the same file path. So we're doing from serializers, import, and then I'm going to paste that in our room serializer. So now we just need to go ahead and add in a variable here. We're going to call that serializer, and we're just going to use the room serializer. So room serializer, then we need to pass in the object or objects that we want to serialize. And then we need to pass in a parameter called many, and this is going to be set to true. So many means, are there going to be multiple objects that we need to serialize, or are we just serializing one? In this case, we are serializing a query set. So many is going to be set to true. So there are many objects. So serializer is now an object here. So what we want to do here is just go ahead and pass in serializer, but we don't want to return back the object. We want to return back the data attribute. So I'll recommend maybe just printing out serializer, see all the values in it, or look up the documentation. But if we access data, that's going to give us rooms in a serialized format. So if I save that, let's go ahead and refresh this and look at this. So we have our get rooms value here. We can see a array right now. So that's now an array, and all that data was now serialized. So we see the first room right here. We see one object, then we see another object. We can see the ID, the title, all the information about it. So now we can officially return it. So let's say in our application, we don't want to just allow users to get the rooms. We want to give them an endpoint to maybe open up a room in their website and view details about it, or maybe we're building out that front end. So what we can do here is go ahead and copy this view, so get rooms, paste that down here, and we're going to change this up a little bit. So we're going to change that to get rooms, so a single room, and then we're going to change rooms to room.objects.get. The ID is going to be PK, so we're going to pass in the primary key. So PK like that. And then the serializer is going to take the room, and then many is going to be false. So this means that it's going to return back a single object as opposed to that entire array. So we have a view now. We just modify that a little bit in our URLs. So if we look at this route right here, it's going to be API, rooms, and then an ID. So in the URLs, we're just going to copy this, paste this. Let's make sure to add in that trailing comma, and I'll just add it twice here. Change this one to get room right there, and then we're going to pass in the dynamic value. That's going to be a string value for now. Pass in the name, and there we go. So that's going to be the endpoint, and let's try this out. So if we go here, we have a list right here. We can see the 2 square brackets. Let's say we want a single room. Let's get room number 1 right here. So with the ID of 1. So we'll throw 1 in, and for some reason that was not configured. Let's check this out. So rooms, that needs to be plural. Sorry about that. I just got into the habit of removing all the S's there. So now if I refresh that, here we go, we get back a single room. So we have information about the room. We see all the participants' IDs, and we can actually nest serializers so we can have children in these. And that's not something that we're going to get into. I get into that in my full Django course. And I also talk about authentication with the Django REST framework, and we use JSON web tokens there. So that's it for our simple API. Now I want to show you how to use this. Maybe you see how we put this together, but it doesn't fully make sense in what we're trying to do with this. So let me just try to give you one example. And for this, if you want to skip this, you can. We're just going to use a little bit of JavaScript here and just make a call here. And I want to show you one issue that can occur when someone else tries to call this API. So let's give you an example. So in our application here, let's go ahead and create a new file here, and we're going to call this front end, or let's just call this cool website. Okay, so somebody from the other side of the world, let's just say they're completely across the world here, they're creating a new website, and all they have at this point is a simple HTML file. So just to really show you separation, let's open up StudyBud here. Let's grab that file and let's bring that out here. So once I'm done with this, I'll actually bring it back here. But for now, we can see our website, which will represent our API. And then we see cool websites right here. So If I go into that website, let's actually open up a new text editor. So let's go ahead and do new file. Let's actually close this out. We'll do new window, open up a completely different text editor. Remember, these two applications do not need to know about each other at all. They're two separate applications. So we're going to go to new file here, or open file. We'll go into my desktop and we're just going to grab our cool website. Okay, so let's add in some HTML. So this person is starting to build out their awesome new website that's going to display all these rooms. They're just going to go ahead and create that HTML tag, and we'll just call this cool rooms. Okay, so let's get rid of this link right here in that JavaScript file. They're going to start building out their title here, and they'll just say cool rooms, and they're going to create a div where all these rooms are going to be displayed. So we'll just create an ID here, and this is going to be rooms-container. Okay, so let's open up this website. So I'm going to minimize all of this. We'll open up the cool website, and here we go. This is all we have. So they have this part of the website done. Let's say they're not into CSS and they want to keep it simple. Now they need to get some data. So they're going to use some JavaScript and they're going to call our API here. So they're going to go into their text editor and they're going to start making requests here. So in their website here, the first thing they're going to do is create some kind of JavaScript file here. So let's see, just underneath our body tag, we're going to create a script tag, and they're just going to go ahead and create a function called getRooms. So don't worry about the JavaScript if you don't know this. We're going to go quick and I won't explain it. Just code along or kind of follow for the concept. So we're creating a function called getRooms, and this is going to be an arrow function. So if you don't know what that is, don't worry about that. So we're creating an arrow function, and this function's job is to make an API call to this endpoint. So we're going to use the fetch API. So they're going to make a request, and we tell them, okay, go to our website here on port 8000 and go to API/rooms. This is the endpoint that you need to call, and this will give you this response right here. So once you call that data, then you can do whatever you want with it. So we're going to pass that into that fetch the fetch request. Now in this fetch request, we want to actually pull this data and get some kind of response. So we're going to use async await. These are going to be the alternative to our promises. It's a different way of working with the fetch API. And we're going to set a variable called response here. And this is going to be a wait, and then we're making that request. So this request right here will get us some data. So what I can do here is go ahead and just do console.log, and we're going to console the response, and we'll just console the response here. So let's go ahead and trigger this function. So we need to call it, and there we go. So that's all the function does right here. So it's a simple function, makes a call, and it's supposed to print out the data. So let's go ahead and check this out. So if I open this up, let's go to our website. Let's open up the console. We want to see this printed out, and oh crap, we have an issue. So this was planned. So we need to work on something called CORS configuration. So CORS stands for cross-origin resource sharing. And you can see this right here. So if I hover over that, we see this issue. And what's happening here is this person is trying to access our website here. And Django is saying, I don't know who you are. You're accessing this website from a completely different resource, and I'm not going to let you access this. So what we need to do is configure that so Django can either allow all endpoints to make requests to our API, or we can even provide a specific set of URLs that are allowed to call our API. So let's go ahead and configure that. So this is a very common issue, the CORS issue. So we're going to go ahead and fix that. And for this, we're going to use something called Django CORS headers. So this is going to be a third-party package that we can install that takes care of this. So the first thing we're going to do is run this install. So we're going to do python-m pip install Django-CORS-headers. So we're going to go ahead and install this. So let's open this up. We're going to open up a new terminal, and we're going to paste this in. So we just installed it. Then in the documentation, it tells us to add this to installed apps. We'll bring that in. So we'll minimize this now. We'll close that one out, leave the server on, and let's go to settings.py. So underneath the REST framework, let's add in CORS headers like that. So you can write that out or just add it. And then after we add that, we need to add in the CORS middleware to this middleware's variable inside of settings.py. So we'll go into middleware. Let's bring this in right here. I'll create some space so we can see it. So CORS headers middleware, and then .CORS middleware. So based on the documentation, we can set 3 different things. So first we have CORS allowed origins, and this is going to be a list of specified URLs that we're going to allow. So it's going to look something like this. Go ahead and allow example.com, allow sub.example.com, port 8080, port 90, and so on. So we can allow multiple ports and URLs to access our website. We can also use regex here and specify some kind of regex right here that allows certain types of domains, or we could specify CORS allow all origins. So this is going to be what we're going to use, and we're just going to bring this down here at the bottom of our website, and we're just going to say true. So by default, this is false, and CORS allow all origins means we're going to allow all URLs to access our website. So if I save that, once this configuration is done, I can close out the documentation, and let's check this out. So we're having this issue. Now if I refresh it, boom, the issue goes away and we have our response. Now this response doesn't tell us anything. So, or it does tell us a lot. It tells us information about that. It tells us the status code, but we want to see this data right here. We actually want to see this response. So we need to, specifically with our front end here, we need to parse this data. So with the fetch API, that's a way to make requests. You can also use Axios, jQuery if you're still using that. There's different ways of doing things, but with the fetch API, we can go ahead and get the rooms here. And the rooms we'll get using the await right here. And we're just going to do response.json. And before I jumped off on my side tangent, I meant to say that with a fetch API, when we send data, we have to stringify it. When we get it, we have to parse it and turn it back into JSON data. So that's just how it works. So let's just copy and paste rooms here. And now we want to see the rooms information. So we can go back to our front end in our cool website. And here we go. So imagine this is somebody from the other side of the world. They just made an API call and they got this data right here from our API, and they're able to see it and actually start working with that data. So that's how that works. We create the API and then somebody can access that. So it's a way of sharing information. It's like a phone call where you're, or I guess sending emails, you're passing data and you're getting data. So let's actually just show you how you can render that out. We might as well show that right now. So let's say this person gets this API call, then they just want to add in some data into the rooms container. So they're going to use a query selector. So we're just going to set the rooms container, and that's going to be equal to document.getElementById. Don't worry about the JavaScript here, so we're not going to focus on that. And we're just going to do rooms container. Okay, so we have this div right here. So we have access to this. And after we get the data, what I want to do is create a for loop. So I'm going to remove that console, and we're going to create a JavaScript for loop. And we're going to set the loop here. So we're going to set I, that's going to be equal to 0. And with JavaScript here, we're going to do rooms.length. So we're going to do .length like that. So while I is less than rooms.length, we're just going to increment I. So we'll just do I++. So that's a for loop in JavaScript for those of you that don't know that, or one of the ways of doing it. Then we're going to set the room variable, and this is going to be set to rooms, and then we're going to access the index of that. So I know it's a little bit of a side tangent from the Django framework, but a lot of people like this in the course when I showed it this way, so I want to do this again here in the full Django 2021 course that I did. So we're going to create a row now, and this is going to be set to these 2 backticks here. So these are template literals, and template literals allow us to add in more than what we would do inside of a regular quote here. So we're going to create some divs here, and it gives us some extra functionality in how we can work with it. So we're going to create like an HTML element using these backticks. Then we can create an H3 tag. And because of these backticks or template literals, we can add in variables directly into our content by using a $ symbol and then these 2 curly braces. So it's actually a little bit like the Django templating engine syntax that we had. So we can now go ahead and just do room.name, and that gives us this div with this content. So in the for loop outside of these backticks, we're just going to do room container. So we're getting this value right here, so this item, and we're going to create some space here, and we're just going to append all these divs right here with the H3 tag inside of this div. So we're just going to do room container.inner HTML. So inner HTML plus equals, and then we're going to set that to row. So we're passing that in. Let's go ahead and create some space, and let's check this out. So undefined. Okay, let's see what's going on here. So we have our room. We're going into rooms. We're getting the request here. Rooms.name. Okay, that needs to be room.name. So this variable right here. So we're going into that, and there we go. So this is the awesome website that this random person from the other side of the world wanted to build out using our API. And regardless of how cool or uncool their website is, we now gave them a way of doing that. Now, if we can tell them, go ahead and access, a certain ID at this endpoint, that's how you would do it. So they would add in links here. When they click on these, they can display that information. So sort of a side tangent, but we just took care of that, and I wanted to go ahead and show you how to do that. So let's go ahead and move on to working with a custom user model. And I kind of want to do some explanation here and explain why we left it out in the beginning here and why we're going to add it the way we'll do it now. So the user model is already built into Django, and this is something that gives us, or this is something that contains how a user gets authenticated, and it contains very important information about our user, and it's a vital part of our application. Now, there's multiple ways of adding to it. For example, in our user model, we don't have a bio, we don't have a profile picture, maybe we want like a full name value. We don't have this information in that user model. Now, one thing we could do is add a one-to-one relationship, and this is how we do this in my Django 2021 course. We add in a one-to-one relationship, and we would simply create a profile model. So the profile model would contain all the information like the user's Facebook account, social links, bios, profile pictures, and so on. And we created this one-to-one relationship, and this one-to-one relationship would simply connect to the user model, and that means that a user can only have one profile, and a profile can only have one user. So we would connect those, and then we would add in things like the profile picture and all that information to the profile model. So this way, we never actually have to touch the user model. Now, what I'm gonna do here, because I already did that in that course, so you can check out that option if you want, and I also have videos on YouTube for free on that. Instead of using that method, we're gonna modify the user model. Now, I typically do not like to use this method. There's downs and ups to both sides with the method where we add the one-to-one relationship. It does require a little bit more configuration when you register your user or update information about the user. It does require some more configuration, but it's safer because the user model is not being touched. Now in here, we're actually gonna override the user model, and then we're gonna customize it. So I don't like doing this, so what I'm gonna do here is create a completely new project. It's gonna take a second here. We're gonna create a completely new Django project. I'm gonna show you how to customize it so we can focus on just that part, and then we're going into this project. We're actually gonna have to clear our database because now once we start messing with that user model, it's gonna really change things up, and you'll see why. And then we're gonna have to re-add in data once that's remigrated. So this is why I saved this part for the very end. So let's go ahead and actually apply this right now. So we're gonna go ahead and close everything out here. So we're gonna close out this project right here. We'll close out our Django project, any other projects that I have. I'm gonna leave, or I guess I'm gonna close it out here. And let's just take our cool website and bring that into StudyBud. And in here, I'm just gonna rename that to, we'll just do API example. Okay, so that way when you look into the documentation, you can see how that looks. Okay, so I already have Django installed globally. You could just go ahead and reinstall that. You could also set up your virtual environment. For now, I'm just gonna go into my desktop here. So CD desktop, just go ahead and run pip install Django. I have it globally. As you can see, I don't have a virtual environment. Make sure that's installed, and then just do Django-admin, and we'll just do user model, or we'll just do custom user model. Okay, so Django-admin start project. So let me zoom in here 1 second. Sorry about that. Okay, so I'm gonna try to go as slow as possible here. So Django custom user model, and then we'll just add in start project. Okay, so this is gonna start up our new Django project. We're gonna go ahead and open up a new VS Code terminal here, or new VS Code or file, text editor. So go ahead and open one up. Find this new project. We should see user model right here, custom user model. Go ahead and open that up in your desktop. So I have that right here. It looks really small for some reason, but just go ahead and select that file. So now we have a new Django project. So let's go ahead and start customizing this. So the first thing we want to do is go into that terminal, and create a new app. So we'll just do, why the heck is this doing this? Okay, Python manage.py start app, and we're going to call this base. So the same thing that we did in our original project. We have our new app. We're going into settings.py, and we're just going to go ahead and configure installed apps. So we're going into base.apps.base config. Okay, so that's all the prep work. Now, there is documentation on how to modify the user model. So instead of going into that, I'm just going to start adding this in right here. So we have our new app here, and we have this user model. And before we start migrating our database, this is why I'm starting this from scratch, so we don't have to redo anything. We're going to go into the models file. Remember, the user model is already built into Django. So what I'm going to do here is go ahead and build out my own user model, and it's going to inherit from the original Django user model. And then we're just going to extend it. So we're just going to go ahead and run an import. So from django.contrib.auth.models import abstract. So import abstract user. Okay. Once we have that, we're going to create a class here. And this is going to be called user. So user is going to inherit from the abstract user. And we're just going to set pass here. Okay, so that's our new user model, and it's going to have all the functionality of the original user model. And this is also where I'm going to show you the example of how to customize like the username to an email field. Instead of logging in with a username, we can log in with an email. Okay, so we have that new user model. And what I'm going to do here is tell Django that I want to use this model right here instead of the original Django user model. So we'll go into settings.py, and we're going to set this variable called auth, and then we're going to do underscore user underscore model. And we're going to tell Django which model is going to be our new authentication model. So the auth model. So we're going to point this to base. So that's our app, and we're going into user. So this model right here, we're pointing it, and we're saying use this model now to actually use our authenticate or handle our authentication and everything like that. Okay, so we have that. And once we point to it, let's go ahead and run some migrations. So we're going to do Python manage.py make migrations. So we're going to run those migrations. We have a user model, Python manage.py migrate. And now that's all migrated. So all the default tables that got migrated, that's all added to the SQLite database. So really quick, let's just go ahead and create a user. So we'll do Python manage.py create super user. We're going to call this user Dennis, and then dennis@email.com. Set a password, so nothing new here. One second, let me restart the password. Okay, so we have a user created. Now, typically we don't have to register our user with the admin panel, but because we created our own user model, we do need to go into admin.py, and now we're just going to do from.models import user, and then we're going to do admin.site.register. Once you see some of the issues that we're going to run into, you'll thank me for starting it fresh like this, because it's actually pretty simple, but it could get tricky for someone that doesn't understand it. And especially with our project at the size that it is, it's going to be a slight nuisance. It's not going to be too hard, but just in case. So let's go ahead and run our server now. So manage.py, run server, and let's check this out. Okay, so all we did was we went ahead and created a new user model. We imported or inherited from this. We added in settings.py the auth user model, pointed that to base and then user, and then we registered that with the admin panel. So now if I go into the admin panel, let's go to port 8000, let's go to /admin, I can now log in as this user, and you'll notice the users is no longer inside of authentication and authorization. So the app that we've been working in up until now, the user was originally right here. But because we created our own user model, it now says the user model is inside of the base app here. So it looks like the original user. It has all the functionality, the password, all this information, and all the stats about our user. So it's a standard user model, and that's how we can simply customize it. Now let's go ahead or that's how we can change what user model we're using. But now let's go ahead and actually customize some of the fields here. So the first thing is I want to make sure I can register with an email value instead of a username. That's a little bit annoying to do. So let's just pull up the admin panel. I just logged out. So we'll just do admin, and we want to log in with an email instead of a username. It's really annoying to have to remember a username for every website. A little bit easier to remember your own email. So let's go ahead and go back to the user model. And in the model, we're going to go ahead and remove pass, and we're going to set a few values here. So the first thing is we're going to set a name. So we're actually going to add in some custom fields. The default field here, or the default user model, has a first and a last name and then a user, but I want a name value. I don't like the first and last name method. So we'll just do char field here. We'll set the max length. That's going to be 200. And because we already have a user, we do need to set null to true. Otherwise, it's going to give us an issue. Okay, so we have the name. Then we are going to add in an email field. Even though it has one, we're just going to override it. This is going to be models.email field. And we're going to set this to unique. So unique has to be true in order to actually log in with it. So that means that two users can't have the same email, because once they try to log in, Django won't know which user is trying to log in. So this needs to be unique. So make sure you set that. And let's just add in a bio. So we'll just do models. So models.text field, and null will be true because we already have a model here. So we just want to make sure that user doesn't have to add in a bio. So now we're just going to do username field, and we're going to set that to email. So we're going to tell Django the username field is now going to be the email field right here. So use this instead of the username. So just change it right there. Now we're also going to set required fields. Go ahead and add that and just make that an empty list for now. And that's it. So once we make these modifications, we're going to go ahead and open up our terminal, do Python manage.py, make migrations. So we're going to make the migrations first, then we need to migrate them. So Python manage.py, migrate, and we should be good. So my server is still on, so I'll close out this terminal. And let's check out the admin panel. So if we go here, now we see email. Now if I try to log in with my username, it doesn't work. I'm going to do dennis@email.com. Voila, I'm logged in here. So let's go to the user. We'll go here. We see the first and last name that was already there, but now we see the name value and a bio. So we have customized our user model, and we added in the email field. So again, the reason why I started this off blank is because I wanted to show you how to do this without running into any issues. And I didn't do this in the beginning of the project because I didn't want somebody running into these issues and then having to fix it later and then having that be a pain and stopping them from completing the tutorial. So if you're ever doing this, do this early on in your project. Don't do it midway through. Now, we are going to do it midway through because if you do happen to want to change your mind and do it, I want to show you a different way of actually being able to actually go through this process and change it, because there's a good chance that you might have to do this. I've had to do this before. So now that we've done the easy way, I want to show you the more challenging way. So let's go ahead and close out what we currently have. And let's just open up our original Django project. So we'll go back in here, and for some reason my text is super small. Okay, so now I'm able to zoom in a little bit. So I guess whatever's on my desktop doesn't really matter. So just go ahead and open up StudyBud and get that server going. So we're going to add in some profile pictures and things like that. So go ahead and make sure your virtual environment's on. Activate the server. So Python manage.py, run server. Start that up here. And let's make sure our project is open. Go back here, port 8000, and let's go ahead and do this. So the first thing I'm going to do here is go ahead and I'm going to clear my database. So at this point, we already have data in here, and this is why I say do this in the beginning of the project. We already have data in here, so we're going to need to completely clear it. So if you don't want to clear your project and you don't want to use this method, don't do it. But at this point, you could maybe make a duplicate of your project and try this out. That's actually what I would recommend. Go ahead and make a copy of this project so you have a backup you can revert to. So that way you don't lose what we've worked on, just in case. So let's go to the DB SQLite database and let's delete it. So we'll delete it permanently. In fact, my server is on, so you're gonna have to turn off your server before you do that. So go ahead and delete that. And then go ahead and go into base. Go to your migrations and delete all the migrations, because you are going to have an issue if you try to migrate with all those previous migrations. So go ahead and clear it as if we've never had a migration and we never had any data in our application. So now that we've cleared all that out, we're gonna have to do a few weird things here, I guess, because we're having to basically start from square one. So we'll go into our application. The first thing I wanna do here is comment out all the other models. So we're gonna act as if these models were never even added into our application. And then we'll have to remigrate them. So I can comment all these out by hitting Control and then /. That's a trick to do that. So I'm not sure if that's gonna be different on your computer, but go ahead and comment all that out. And let's go ahead and remove this right here. So we're no longer using that default user model that Django gives us. So now we're gonna create our new model just like we did. So we're repeating what we did in the last section here, and we're gonna use the abstract user model here. So let me go ahead and open up the demo code that I need to view for this. So give me 1 second. Okay, so, all right, I have that prepped here and I'm gonna continue. So I have that open and we're just gonna go ahead and make that quick import. So before we finish this abstract user, let's make that import. So from django.contrib.auth.models, and we're gonna import abstract user. So we just did this. Then we're gonna take abstract user, we're gonna paste that in here. Let's go ahead and add in pass, and that's it. So all we're trying to do is get Django to look at our new user model as opposed to what we originally had. So once we set this in the last step here, what we did was we went into settings.py. Sorry about the outside noises. If you can hear those, I have like construction companies out there now. So now that we have this, we're going into settings.py. And we need to go underneath our URLs. Well, technically it doesn't matter where you add it, but I'm gonna add it under my URLs, and we're gonna set the auth_user_model. And that's gonna be pointing to base.user. So the user model we have in here now. So we just did that. Okay, so we have that taken care of. And now let's try to migrate this. So I wanna show you the issue before we continue. So I might as well show you this right now. So if I try to run a migration, so we'll just do python manage.py make migrations. We're gonna see some issues. So at this point, we have all these files, and again, I'm gonna do this more manually, but we have all these files and it says, hey, I can't import room and topic and message because I don't know what the heck these are. We haven't even ran those migrations. Now, if we didn't comment out our models, when we try to run this migration, Django would give us an issue right here. In fact, let's just try this. So let's uncomment this. And let's try this one more time. So python manage.py make migrations. So I just cleared that. Okay, never mind. Wow, it actually did work right away. Sorry about that. Okay, well, I guess I'm not sorry because that actually fixes our problem. So go ahead and clear your database or delete the database. Make sure you add in this model, clear all the old migrations. That was important because this will not work. Remigrate it, so re-add in all these in the migrations, and then just do python manage.py migrate. Boom, okay, perfect. Wow, that actually really saves us a lot of time. So we just created a new database and new database tables, but now we're using this user model right here. So let's go ahead and create the super user. So python manage.py create super user. Let's try that one more time. So python manage.py create super user. And we're just going to add in Dennis. This will be dennis@email.com. And then the password. Duplicate that password, and there we go. Okay, so let's run the server now. So python manage.py run server. Okay, so we're going to see a few issues still here though. So at this point, if we go to the admin panel, we'll just go to /admin. I can now log in with this username, and we have a clear database here. So we have no messages and we have no topics. All we have is our user. So we need to register the user with the admin panel. So we'll go into the admin panel or admin.py file, and we're just going to import the user now. So it's going to be a little bit weird because now we import user from the models instead of that default import that we had. And let's just add this right here. So we're going to go ahead and do admin.site.register, and we're going to pass in user. Okay, so we register the user. Now we can see one user here. So we're just kind of restarting from the beginning, and back in all the pages here, we're going into the views now. So let's just go ahead and go line by line here, or not line by line, but file by file. And we're going to change this default import, and we're going to change this to user right here. So now we're going in here. So this is the difference now that we're allowing our own user model to be, or now that we're accessing our own user model. So now we're using that. We're not making that original import. Also in forms.py, we also import the user model that way. We're going to change that and change it to this. Okay, so we have that user model. Everything should be good. Views, forms. All right, so let's go ahead and just start changing the login field here. So let's add in our custom fields now. So we're going into models now, and we're going to do what we just did in the last section here. So in the last section, we went into that model and we added in the name value. So we added name. That's going to be models.char field. Max length, we're setting that to 200. Null is going to be set to true. So we're just repeating a few things here. We're adding in an email. So email is going to be set to models.email field. And null is also going to be true. And we want a bio. This will be models dot text field. So we're going to do a text field for the bio, and null will also be set to true. So let's also add in blank as true here. So actually, you know what? We're going to leave it like that because I want to require this at some point. So we're going to leave it like that. And then we're going to have an avatar. So avatar like that. And this is something we're going to comment out. So I'm going to do this in a second because it does require its own configuration. So now we just need the username field. So username field is going to be email. So we're just overriding this, and I'm doing this step by step. So as we face the issues, I can fix them right away. So we'll just do required, and required is going to be empty. Okay, so let's run these migrations now. So username field must be unique. So I forgot about that. So the email field needs to be unique. That's going to be true. And let's try this. Okay, so this issue should go away. Let's run that migration. Make migrations, Python manage.py, migrate, and let's check this out. So let's just make sure this was added. So in the user model, I can now add in a name. So we'll just do Dennis Ivanov. And for the bio, let's just add in some lorem ipsum text here. So we'll just say, actually, we'll go to my website, DennisIV.com. Sorry about that chainsaw outside. So we have that. We're going to add that as a bio. We'll save that, and the user now has some more information. Okay, so that all worked. Now what we want to do is add in a image field. So I'm going to pause it and wait for that chainsaw to be done. All right, so now when we refresh the page, all the content goes away because we have a completely new database. So before we add in the user profile picture, I do want to add in some content so that way we can actually output it and see what we need to update and actually see those profile pictures rendered. So the only reason why we were seeing that earlier as far as the content was because I didn't refresh the website after we made all those changes, so completely forgot about that. So let's go ahead and just add in some more information. So we'll add in a room, and we'll just say, let's learn Python. And then once I save that, I can see what picture I need to update. And once I actually update that part of the code, we'll see that it actually works. So for the room messages, we also do have profile pictures. So we'll just say, looks cool. And then later on, I will register as another user and we'll output that user's profile picture. So back inside of the model here, so in the user model in models.py, let's go ahead and uncomment the avatar attribute. So this is going to be set to models.image field. So before we even run the migrations or actually save anything, let's go ahead and open up the terminal here. And I want to show you why I waited for this. So at this point, if I hit save here or Control S, we're going to see this issue here. So the image field relies on a third-party package called Pillow, which is simply an image processing library. And we need this in order for this field to work here. So I didn't want to deal with that right away when we were still making the user model. So now that we have it, let's go ahead and run this install, and we need to configure a few more things here. So we'll go ahead and turn off our server, and we'll just do pip or Python -m pip install pillow. So we'll get pillow installed, and once I run the server, that issue should go away. So python manage.py run server, and there we go. So I haven't run the migrations yet, so we want to finish up the actual attribute here. And what I want to do next here is set the null value to true. So we already have a user here, so I don't want to have any conflicts in the database. And we can actually set the default image. So let's say a user registers. We don't want to have to force them to upload a picture right away. They might not have one ready right away. So let's just set a default picture with some kind of like avatar picture, and that way they can choose to update this later. So we're going to set this to an image inside of static and images. And if you downloaded that template, you should have a picture called avatar.svg. So if you don't have this, go ahead and get that from the source code, or just add in your own image into this file path. So static and then images, and then set that right here. So we're just going to do avatar.svg. And I always talk funny when I'm sounding out and typing. Okay, so we're still not migrating yet. We just added in a default. So every single user model by default will have this picture until it gets updated. So for user uploaded content, we talked about static files earlier, and these images are static files. Now, there's a different way to handle user uploaded content or user uploaded images. So what's going to happen here is when a user uploads it, we first need to tell Django where to upload this picture to, and then how to actually render out the image URL. So let's go into settings.py, and we'll go down to where we configured our original static files. So down here, we have the static files directory, and that works for the standard images on our website and the CSS and JavaScript files. But for user uploaded content, we need to set media_root. So media root is going to tell Django where to upload these user profile pictures. So if we later on had some user uploaded content, maybe for a room, or maybe a user can add a picture to their message, media root is going to tell Django when that form gets submitted where this picture is going to go. So Django is going to look at media root, and it's going to follow the file path that we give it. So at this point, we're just going to set this to the base directory, and we're going to tell Django, go into the static folder and store this picture inside of the images folder. So we'll go into static, and then we'll go into images. So you can store your static files in different ways. Typically in a production environment, you'd use something like an AWS S3 bucket and upload it directly there. But for now, in our development environment, this will do just fine. So we're telling Django, put this picture right here. Now, after we have our media root, and we're not going to worry about static root in this video here. So after we have our media root, we also need to specify a URL for these pictures. So we're going to do media_URL. So in this case, just like we have a URL for the static for all the links here, the links and standard images, well, we're going to specify a media URL for user uploaded pictures. So now they're going to be prefixed with images here. So we have a media URL and a media root. So we're not done yet. We also need to configure our root directory's urls.py file. So in here, we need to add in the file path to these URLs. So we first need to make a few imports. So we'll just do from django.conf, and we'll import settings. So this will give us access to settings.py, so to this folder. So after that, we need to do from django.conf.urls, and we're going to import, or urls.static, and we are going to import the static method. Okay, so we have our URL paths, and we're going to add in one more path, but instead of adding it as a path like this, we're just going to do URL patterns, and we're just going to append to it. So plus equals, we're going to use the static method, and we're just going to tell Django, go ahead and set a URL path to settings.media_URL. Then we're going to set that to document_root, and I want to make sure my face isn't covering this. And document root is going to point to settings, and I'll explain what's going on here in a second. So settings.media_root. So we're setting a URL, and the file path is going to be media URL from settings. So this is the URL. So we set this URL right here, and we're telling it, set the URL and get the file from media root. So settings.media_root. So we just connected these two right here. So in settings.py, we connected media root to media URL. So let's save all of this. And now let's run our migration. So the default model that we have already should be attached to this avatar when we run this migration. So let's go ahead and open up our terminal. And we're just going to open up a new terminal here. Our server is still running, and I'm just going to run python manage.py make migrations. So that's going to prep the migrations for the avatar in that user model. Then we need to run that migration. So we'll just do python manage.py migrate. So we ran the migration, and let's take a look at what we have here. So if I go into the admin panel, let's go ahead and do /admin. If I go to users, go to Dennis right here, I should now see avatar here. So if I click on this, we can see the file path. So that's the domain, images, that's what we set in media URL, and then we see the picture. So when I ran that migration, by default, this was added to Dennis. So let's go ahead and change that picture. So we'll go back to the admin panel. I shouldn't have closed that. And we'll just go into users. And let's actually update this profile picture. So you can't do this from the form on the front end because we have not configured that form yet. So I added some pictures of myself here. We'll just take this one right here and we'll just do open, submit that, and Django already knows how to process this. So we'll take care of that form submission in a second. For now, we'll just do it from the admin panel. So let's render this picture out now. So we'll go back to our homepage, and I want to render this out right here and anywhere I make a comment or anywhere I set up a room here. So we'll go back into our template, and we want to start with our index.html file or our home.html, so the home page. So that's actually in the feed component or the room component. Let's see, what the heck did I call that? I'm like starting to lose all this. Okay, so we have the feed component. Okay, so in the feed component, we're looping through all the rooms, and we want to output the user profile picture. So let's see, let's just go ahead and do a search for the image tag. So here we go, we see the avatar, and right now it's a link to this random picture generator. And we're gonna remove all of that, and we're gonna get the profile picture. So in this case, I'm gonna go into the room, then we're going into the host, which is the user, then we're going into avatar. And instead of just specifying the avatar, I need to specify the URL here. So we'll do avatar.url. So now if I refresh this, now I see my picture right here. So we're rendering out the profile picture, and that looks a lot better. So I can also do that for the header section. So we'll go into the navigation bar. We'll just update this in a few pictures, and then eventually I'll leave this up to you to make all these updates. I don't want to spend time on the tutorial just uploading or updating pictures. So we'll go into templates in the nav bar. Let's see, in the nav bar, where do we have the image tag? So we have the logo, then we have the avatar right here. So we want to update this. So if the user is authenticated, output the avatar. So in this case, we're going into user, or we'll just do request.user. So we're getting the user based on the request.user model, and then we're going into avatar.url. So we're specifying the URL. So if I refresh that, there we go, I see my profile picture. So I'm just gonna go ahead and update this in a few different areas here, and I wanna show you one little issue. So if we delete this user picture, we are gonna get an error. So I guess I won't show it to you, but if you delete that picture, you're gonna get an error because we're accessing the avatar URL attribute. So make sure users cannot not have a picture. So if they delete it, have some kind of default picture go in there. So we'll make a few more updates. So we'll add this to the activity feed. So we'll do that right here. And then we'll add in a new user, and we'll show you how to submit that form. So we'll go into activity, and let's see. So we have the avatar right here. We'll update this. So message.user.avatar.url, and we'll also do this in the chat. So we'll refresh that. That should have updated it. Or was that in the avatar or the activity page? So I guess that works, but we need to go to the activity component and update this right here. So let's see, up here in the activity component, let's update this guy right here, refresh that, and let's go to the message. We'll update this host information. So what I'm gonna do is just update the host and the chat, and then I'll leave it to you to update all the participants and any other areas where I may have missed this. So I got my point across as far as showing you how to do it. Now it's up to you to apply that. So let's go to the room here. We'll go to room and let's see. So we have the room, the host should be somewhere right here. So if the request user, that's the update method, the room header right here, hosted by, and here we go. So we see the avatar. Let's update this. So we'll just do room.host.avatar.url. And we'll also update the conversation. So down here, let's see, random user. Okay, so the avatar right here, let's take this value. And in this case, we're going into the message.user.avatar.url. Okay, so let's test this out right here. So now we see the host. Let's say I register as another user. So let's go ahead and do that. Actually, before we do that, I want to update the user update form. So I want to fix that first. So let's go ahead and fix it. So we'll go ahead and go into settings. So in this area, now this form needs to be updated. So we just have a username and an email, but it doesn't represent our new user model. So for this, let's go ahead and create a new form and render that out. So we'll close everything out. We'll go into forms.py and let's actually go to views. So we'll go into views, we'll take this user creation form, and then we'll open up forms.py and we'll just paste that in here. So what I need to do is go away from the default user creation form on registration, and then I also need to create an updated user form to represent these fields here. So we'll import that for now, and let's go to our user form. So in our user form, we now have a name. Then we're gonna have a username, email, and let's just add in avatar. So avatar, and then we'll add in bio. So I'll make sure that I'm not covering this. So this is inside of the user form. So remember that. So we'll just do bio. Okay, so you can still see that. So if I refresh this, now we see all of this. And again, I'm all messed up here because I'm so zoomed in. My screen is just weird. I'm at 175% here, plus zooming in on this too. So now we see the current picture, we see this file, and we see all this information. So I can actually update and process this right now. This will all work fine, but the only issue is that the image right here will not work. So we need to fix up the front end and the back end to actually process this. So from the front end, inside of this form, we're gonna go into the create user form. I have so many files here, but I'll leave them just so you can have the originals. So update user. We'll go in here, and what I need to do is add in multi-part, or we need to specify the ink type, and this is going to be multi-part / form data. So this is going to tell us that we're actually submitting files with this form and not just content in the original field. So we specify the ink type, and then in the back end to process this, we do need to update the views. So we'll go to the edit user page. So we have the register page, user profile, create room, update room, delete. Okay, update user. So in here, all we're gonna do is also pass in request.files, and that's all we need to do. And this will send the files with it and actually process that. So update the form, update the update user method, and anytime you're submitting files, you want to make sure that the form takes that in. So I'll refresh this now. So I'll just do a hard refresh, Control-Shift-R. And let's go ahead and add in some information. We'll just say the bio was now updated. So we'll just say updated. We'll take a new profile picture, and let's say I want to revert back to this picture. So we'll add that in. If I submit that, now my profile picture was updated. And you can go in and update the bio, update the profile picture inside of the user form, and just make sure all that's modified. So we added that in, we updated the user update form. And now we just want to update the registration form. So I want to register as a new user. So if I go to login and then sign up, we have new attributes here. So I want to represent those attributes. So we'll go in here. Let's go into the forms file. So we imported the user creation form. So in here, let's just go ahead and do class, and we'll just do my user creation form. So we're going to create a form that's going to inherit from this user creation form. So it's going to have all the same attributes here. So we're going to go ahead and add this in. That's our user creation form. And then in this user creation form, we need to specify class of the, or class meta, pass in the model. That's going to be the user. Then we need to add in the fields. So when a user is registering, what fields do we want to render out? So we just want to render out the name. So I want to get the name right away. We want to get the username. Then let's get the email. We also want to get the password. So we have a password and the password confirmation. So in this section and in the form by default, they're called password 1 and then password 2. Okay, so my user creation form. So inside of views, I can actually remove this user creation form, and I'm going to paste in the new form that I just created. So I already copied that, and I'm going to paste in my user creation form. So now back in the registration view, we're just going to change this to my user creation form and then paste that in right here too. So right here and right here. So now if I refresh this, now I see more form fields. So let's say we want to have someone named Tim register. Tim will register with the username of Tim, and we'll just do tim@email.com. That's what he's going to log in with. We'll just add in the password, confirm that, and let's register. So now if I register, I'm registered as Tim. I can see that default avatar. That looks good. I can join a room and comment. So we'll just say, I'll check it out. Okay, so now we see Tim's comment, and again, update the participants there. And if Tim wants to update his avatar, let's go ahead and just say Tim's going to take my old picture. We'll update that, and we'll add in a bio, and we'll just say I like to code, and that should be good. Okay, so there we go. So Tim is now part of this room right here, and we can see Tim's information and my information. And that's it for the registration page. So the last thing I'm going to do in this tutorial here is going to be to update the login form. So typically a user logs in with a username, and it will still actually work like this. We can still log in with this user. So let's actually log out, and I'll log in as Tim here. So we'll just do tim@email.com, and we'll just let the password autofill. So that works here. So that works at this point, but I also want to update the login form to say email instead of username. And I want to make sure that it's just more precise in the back end here. So in the login form, we'll just do login register, and we'll just change this to, let's see. So in the form, that's the registration form. So we need to open up this container. We're just going to say email. So we want to prompt the user for the right name. We'll just say email. And again, the username was working because Django still sees the email as the username value. So at this point, we'll just update the name. So we're sending an email back, and we updated the label. So in the backend, we're just going to go ahead and get the email value. And I'm just going to go ahead and replace all of these. So email, and then we're going to get the user by the email. So that has to be unique now. So we have the email here, the email updated here. This will now be email, and that should be it. So we just wanted to clean that up, make sure it looks a little bit better, and we'll just do dennis@email.com, and we'll log in. Okay, perfect. I'm logged in as Dennis now. I can see all this stuff right here. I can see my account. So that is going to be it for the entire course. So go ahead and update all these sections. I noticed a few things here, like if I go to create a room and if I hit cancel, well, it's going to take me to this template. So just update that URL. These are little things here. Update all the participants. So in the room here, we see participants. Update these values. Go ahead and make sure that the user has their name here, the profile picture, and just make sure all this is rendered out with things like the bio and so on, and make the customizations you need. So I'm super excited. If you got this far, you finished the course, you probably learned a lot in this process, And that's going to be it for this tutorial. I highly recommend you check out my full Django course. Check out my YouTube channel. I have a lot of free content, a lot of premium content also on Udemy and on my own website. I'm so happy that you made it through this course, and I hope to hear about this in the comment section. Let me know how this was.